It is Monday, September 9th, 2019. It is 8 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, and so you know what time it is. It's time for a little bit of coin metal. And it was a very early get your ass kicked at Jiu-Jitsu Monday. We didn't do a whole lot of ass kicking, just a lot of reps. A lot of reps. It's good for you. You gotta do it. But yeah, we were covering some butterfly guard stuff, and some passing some guard, and I found it was generally productive. Of course, I have a hard time remembering all the stuff that we did, but I don't know. We did a little bit of X guard drills in the butterfly guard. It's not really a guard that I spent enough time on, but we also covered an interesting guard pass, and it's like if somebody's in butterfly guard facing you, you kind of rotate into where they open up their legs to re-navigate their buttocks around, and continue facing you, right? And you take your leg and you stick it on the inside of their in between their legs, but down towards like their hamstring. Say like if you're coming in with your right foot, you'd be going into like the left hamstring, but you want to like keep it snug so that your opponent can't like roll back towards you, or it makes it a little bit harder for them to sit up. But I don't know, I was having some difficulty with it, but the one that I liked was that where you step in on it, and I can't remember like which position it was starting from, but I know that it was like you hook your knee like you're going like knee on belly, and your ankle around their hip, and you just like force your way up, and and you end up with a full guard pass straight up the middle, kind of like it, a little bit pressure oriented. And that's kind of my game, I think I've disclosed that multiple times on this show that, I like a higher pressure kind of game. Although I do find myself when I'm underneath, I have a little bit of difficulty dealing with other people's pressure. So, again, it's something else to work on. Although today I kind of managed my composure really well. There were a couple points where we would go from rep to, like, if I had resistance on me, where he would fight the resistance and then like circumvent the resistance, like show me that what he would do or where he would go in order to circumvent it, and we go like one or two steps after that, and then break it up and restart to another rep. But I think that's the kind of liberty you can have in that kind of setting. In a class setting, usually the instructor is trying to keep things a little more organized and according to their game plan for the day, But like I said, I really enjoyed it. And like I said, I felt like it was productive because we were doing some stuff on the ground in the butterfly guard that I wasn't entirely familiar with and didn't spend enough time on, and so it was certainly a little bit of enrichment for my butterfly guard game, but I'm sure I can go much farther with it. Anyway, let's go ahead and throw down into some music, and I do have plenty of tabs open on the browser, so I think we're going to get a little conspiratorial tonight, maybe, possibly, I don't know, it may happen. Anyway, let's go ahead and throw down. I got some body count for you, of course. And I haven't been playing it as much just because I've played it to death, really. But here it is, The Ski Mask Way by Body Count. First Dance here on Coin Metal. And that was Death Clock with The Gears. As usual, the old Twitter feed have coughed something up that is kind of doesn't have anything to do with anything else that we were talking about. So I don't know that we're actually going to go into that one quite yet. If if at all. Honestly, I got a whole bunch of stuff on the grill today. Let me see if I can drag this thing up. I'm trying to find a PDF that I had previously opened because I thought it was a really cool idea to actually read it. If I can find the damn thing again. Well, let's see. It doesn't. Forget Facebook, who's really been selling your data. That's definitely something we want to get into. Where is the damn thing that we are trying to find, though? Yeah, like I said, I'd found this. Here it is. And this is about 18 pages. I think we can get through all of it. But like I said, we haven't spent enough time, I think, on this show talking about technical stuff. You know, we talk a lot about regulation and what different states and what different countries are doing and all that other bullshit. But, you know, I think we've kind of strayed a little bit away from cryptocurrencies as a technical thing. So I think we got to get back to it. And so here it is. Got this PDF, Decentralization in Bitcoin and Ethereum Networks. Abstract. Blockchain-based cryptocurrencies have demonstrated how to securely implement traditionally centralized systems, such as currencies, in a decentralized fashion. However, there have been few measurement studies on the level of decentralization they achieve in practice. We present a measurement study on various decentralization metrics of two of the leading cryptocurrencies with the largest market capitalization and user base, Bitcoin and Ethereum. We investigate the extent of decentralization by measuring the network resources of nodes and the interconnection among them, the protocol requirements affecting the operation of nodes, and the robustness of the two systems against attacks. In particular, we adapted existing internet measurement techniques and used the Falcon Relay Network as a novel measurement tool to obtain our data. We discovered that neither Bitcoin nor Ethereum has strictly better properties than the other. We also provide concrete suggestions for improving both systems. Introduction. Oh, wait a minute. Does this even give us an attribution? Oh, yeah. This is by Adam F.A.F. Genser, Sumu Basu, Ite Ayal, Robert Van Rennes, and Emin Gensier. So I know there's a few penises in there, potentially a vagina or two. Couldn't be definitive either way. But this is Initiative for Cryptocurrencies and Contracts, IC3, Computer Science Department, Cornell University, Electrical Engineering Department, Technion. So yeah. Introduction. Cryptocurrencies are emerging as a new asset class with a market capitalization of about $150 billion as of September 2017, a growing ecosystem, and a diverse community. The most prominent platforms that account for over 70% of this market are Bitcoin and Ethereum. And the underlying technology, the blockchain, receives consensus in a decentralized open system and enables innovation in industries that conventionally relied upon trusted authorities. Some examples of such services include land record management, domain name registration, and voting. The key feature that empowers such services and makes these platforms interesting is decentralization. Without it, such services are technologically easy to construct, but require trust in a centralized administrator. Decentralization is a property regarding the fragmented control over the protocol. In the Bitcoin and Ethereum protocols, users submit transactions for miners to sequence into blocks. Better decentralization of miners means higher resistance against censorship of individual transactions. For communication, Bitcoin and Ethereum also have a peer-to-peer network for disseminating block and transaction information. Both Bitcoin and Ethereum also contain full nodes, which serve two critical roles. Number 1, to relay blocks and transactions to miners, and number 2, answer queries for end users about the state of the blockchain. Understanding the network properties of full nodes is crucial for protocol design and analysis of each network's resilience to attacks. Ongoing research explores ways to make Bitcoin and Ethereum networks more decentralized without measurements on the underlying network. Hence, debates and decisions about the underlying networks are often based on assumptions rather than measurement. In this paper, we present a comprehensive measurement study on decentralization metrics in these operational systems and shed light on whether or not existing assumptions are satisfied in practice. We adapt prior internet measurement techniques for Bitcoin and Ethereum and use novel approaches to obtain application layer data. Our main data sources are, number 1, direct measurements of these networks from multiple vantage points. Number 2, a Bitcoin relay network called Falcon that we deployed and operated for a year. And number 3, blockchain histories of Bitcoin and Ethereum. Our study presents findings regarding the network properties, impact of protocol requirements, security, and client interactions. This paper makes 3 contributions. First, it provides new tools and techniques for measuring blockchain-based cryptocurrency networks. The key tool introduced here is the Falcon Relay Network that we built to serve as a backbone for ferrying blocks. This network was deployed for Bitcoin across 5 continents, providing a unique vantage point on pruned blocks. Second, we perform a comparative study of decentralization metrics in Bitcoin and Ethereum. Our key findings are, number 1, the Bitcoin network can increase the bandwidth requirements for nodes by a factor of 1.7 and keep the same level of decentralization as 2016. Number 2, the Bitcoin network is geographically more clustered than Ethereum, with many nodes likely residing in data centers. Number 3, Ethereum has lower mining power utilization than Bitcoin and would benefit from a relay network. And number 4, small miners experience more volatility and block rewards in Bitcoin than Ethereum. Number 2, Bitcoin and Ethereum. Bitcoin and Ethereum use Nakamoto Consensus 5-757. These are references, sorry. Nakamoto Consensus to regulate transaction serialization in their blockchains. While architecturally very similar, these systems differ significantly in terms of their API, abstractions, and wire protocol. 2.1. The Bitcoin Protocol. Bitcoin is a protocol that sequences transactions into groups called blocks. The protocol targets a block production interval of 10 minutes with a maximum size of 1 megabyte. At the time of our measurements, the last 100 blocks had a 0.99 megabyte median block size and a 9.8 minute mean interval. The wire protocol implements a peer-to-peer network based on flooding block and transaction announcements. The peer-to-peer network is formed through point-to-point links. To form a link, clients establish a TCP connection and perform a protocol-level 3-way handshake. The protocol-level handshake exchanges the state of each client, such as the height of the blockchain and the version string associated with the software. And it's got a nice little table here. Table 1, timeline of measurements. All dates are in 2017 unless otherwise noted. Let's see here. Oh, shit. With the software being run, when a client discovers or receives a new block, it floods the network with the hash of the block. If a neighboring client needs the block, it requests the block based on the hash value. There are many different block formats, such as compact and Merkle blocks, but BMS focuses on retrieval of full blocks. 2.2. The Ethereum Protocol. Ethereum protocol focuses on providing a platform to facilitate building decentralized applications on its blockchain. To sequence transactions, Ethereum adopts a design inspired by Nakamoto consensus and the Ghost protocol. Ethereum adopts a chain selection rule to harness the residual mining power in pruned blocks for improved security. The protocol includes such blocks, called uncles, in its blockchain and rewards the corresponding miners. Ethereum targets a block interval between 10 to 20 seconds. The block size is indirectly determined by an execution fee called gas that fluctuates over time. At the time of our measurements, the last 100 blocks were generated with a 2.9 KB median block size and 16.3 second average interval. Yeah, there we go. Ethereum employs a UDP-based node discovery mechanism inspired by Kademlia, but the rest of the P2P communication is over TCP. Unlike Bitcoin, messages between nodes are encrypted and authenticated. Ethereum's wire protocol is poorly documented, so we rely on the client implementations and Ethereum wiki pages for information. In Ethereum, clients request blocks by corresponding block hash. Older clients request blocks which consist of a body and a header, while newer clients request each piece separately. The measurement system in this paper focuses on the retrieval of full blocks and block bodies. 3. Measurement infrastructure. Blockchain-based cryptocurrencies operate on global peer-to-peer networks that span multiple administrative domains. Measurement of such networks concerns the exploration of the relationship between peers, the capabilities of individual peers, and the properties of the system as a whole, ergo its security and fairness. To characterize Bitcoin and Ethereum, we deployed Blockchain Measurement System, BMS, a measurement system that ran experiments of varying duration from a few days to up to 12 months. Network properties. BMS uses multiple vantage points in order to gain a comprehensive view of the cryptocurrency networks. To capture the evolution of these networks, BMS has been continuously collecting data regarding the provisioned bandwidth of peers and peer-to-peer latency. BMS first connects to a peer, collects measurements, and then disconnects before proceeding to the next peer. These measurements target, number 1, Bitcoin nodes connected over IPv4, IPv6, and Tor, and Ethereum nodes connected over IPv4. As of May 2017, Ethereum does not have any Tor nodes, mainly because Tor is exclusively TCP, whereas Ethereum node discovery is UDP-based. Moreover, this study excludes Ethereum's IPv6 network because BMS was unable to discover enough nodes to reach generalized conclusions. Table 1 shows the timeline of the data collection for each network and the number of nodes measured in each measurement. To estimate the peer-to-peer latency, BMS uses multiple vantage points geographically distributed across the world. Figure 1 shows the geographic distribution of the measurement infrastructure. 15 out of 18 nodes reside in Planet Labs Global Research Network, and the remaining 3 nodes are part of Cornell's academic network located in Ithaca, New York. To measure the provisioned bandwidth of nodes in Bitcoin and Ethereum, BMS used nodes with extensive resources. In particular, measuring the maximum bandwidth that Bitcoin and Ethereum nodes have access to requires nodes with, number 1, high download capacities to ensure that bottlenecks are not in the measurement apparatus, and number 2, sufficient disk capabilities to store detailed results. since these machines need access to orders of magnitude higher bandwidth capacity than what is achievable on shared infrastructure, such as Planet Lab nodes. Some BMS data was collected using dedicated, well-provisioned beacon nodes located at Cornell University. Finally, BMS needs to pick a sample of nodes from the Bitcoin and Ethereum networks. As a sample, BMS uses a list containing nodes from Bitcoin and Ethereum node crawling sites, and a locally deployed Ethereum supernode configured with a high peer limit. Interpretations in this paper assume that inferences made from the reachable public nodes are representative of their entire networks. In reality, these networks contain nodes that are not visible to the public, ergo they are behind a NAT or a firewall. One such class of nodes are part of mining. While much of the mining infrastructure is private, prior measurement work shows that mining operations often have gateway nodes to communicate with the peer-to-peer network. The properties of internal mining pool nodes are orthogonal to the focus of this paper. Blockchain information. A naive approach to obtaining information about the blockchain would be to simply run a Bitcoin and Ethereum node. However, this precludes information that cannot be obtained through the respective wired protocols. More important decentralization metrics center around the analysis of blocks that are not part of the main blockchain. In Ethereum, many of these blocks become uncles, which can simply be requested through the wire protocol. In Bitcoin, however, a block that is not part of the main blockchain simply becomes pruned. Pruned blocks in Bitcoin have no effect on the state of the system. They are deleted by clients without impacting correctness. Thus, it is crucial to connect directly to miners to capture pruned blocks. A critical component of BMS to observe pruned blocks is the Falcon Relay Network, which relays blocks between Bitcoin miners. The Falcon Relay Network uses cut-through routing to quickly disseminate blocks worldwide, which incentivizes miners to connect to Falcon. Indeed, Falcon is directly connected to at least 36.4% of the entire hash power in Bitcoin. Since there is just one other operational relay network for Bitcoin, Falcon has observed blocks that have not been seen on other well-connected nodes. Number 4. Measurements. In this section, we present measurements taken by BMS. In each measurement, we describe the methodology, followed by the results of our analysis. As with any measurement study of a large scale, an uninstrumentable artifact measurements are not perfect. We conclude each section by addressing some potential sources of error and their mitigation. 4.1. Provision bandwidth. Provision bandwidth is an estimate on a node's transmission capacity, characterizing how much bandwidth the node has to communicate with the rest of the cryptocurrency network. Greater provision bandwidth helps miners to propagate/collect blocks to and from the network faster. Thus, it becomes more difficult for a malicious miner to situate themselves in the network to achieve the rushing property and attack the blockchain. Knowledge of provision bandwidth also aids in setting protocol parameters such as the block size and frequency. Methodology. BMS measures the provision bandwidth of each peer by requesting a large amount of data from each peer and seeing how fast the peers can stream the data to BMS's measurement nodes. BMS does this by asking for blocks that were first seen over a year ago, similar to how a state node asks for blocks to sync state. Each request asks for the same set of blocks in Bitcoin and blocks or the corresponding bodies in Ethereum. Next, BMS divides the time into epochs and records the number of bytes received during each epoch. Whatever. Epoch. I think epoch is clear only because it's not confusable with epic. Anyway, continuing. This process continues until either BMS receives all data or predefined timeout of 30 seconds is reached. A long timeout helps BMS eliminate effects from TCP slow start and other initialization noise, as well as identify and eliminate spurious spikes in throughput caused by buffering in the kernel by BMS. Finally, BMS processes the collected data to determine the provisioned bandwidth. To do so, first it identifies the independent data streams by combining successive epochs containing active data transfers. Then it eliminates streams that are shorter than 500 milliseconds to mitigate initialization artifacts such as TCP slow start. BMS then outputs the maximum observed throughput among the remaining distinct continuous streams as the provisioned bandwidth of the remote peer. The experiments in this paper are run on servers with 1 gigabyte per second links at Cornell University. This has not changed from 2016 to 2017, which allows us to make comparisons to a previous study in 2016. Let's see here. Oh wow, looks like Bitcoin Tor just spiked through the roof on the scale here. And it was a chart showing statistics on distribution of provisioned bandwidth and the CDF. Let's see what Tor jumped to. 1%. Nice. 8.1. Results. Table 2 summarizes per node bandwidth results that BMS has collected. We see that Bitcoin nodes on both IPv4 and IPv6 networks have consistently higher bandwidth compared to Ethereum's IPv4 nodes. In particular, the median IPv4 and IPv6 nodes have about 1.9 times and 2.7 times the bandwidth of the typical Ethereum IPv4 node. In contrast, Bitcoin Tor nodes have an order of magnitude lower bandwidth compared to directly connected nodes, though they are not unusable. Ergo, 90% has more than 2 megabits per second. Ongoing research explores alternatives to the Tor network that also provide efficient communication. Figure 2b shows the cumulative distribution of the bandwidth measurements. Steep increases in the Bitcoin IPv4/IPv6 curves around 10 megabytes per second and 100 megabytes per second regions represent typical bandwidth capacities of a home user and typical Amazon EC2 Bitcoin instances. For Ethereum, we observe a similar accumulation around 10 megabytes per second region, but the bandwidth is more evenly distributed over the remaining nodes. As the long-tail distribution and higher standard deviation indicates, bandwidth of Bitcoin IPv4/IPv6 nodes are spread out over a wider range of values compared to Ethereum nodes. While the most well-provisioned Bitcoin nodes have around 300 megabytes per second of spare bandwidth, the highest Ethereum node capacity that BMS has observed is limited at 250 megabytes per second. One of the most interesting discoveries of this study is that the Bitcoin network has improved tremendously in terms of its provisioned bandwidth. The results show that Bitcoin IPv4 nodes, which used to be connected to the network with a median bandwidth of 33 megabits per second in 2016, have a median bandwidth of 56 megabytes per second as of February 2017. In other words, the provisioned bandwidth of a typical full node is now 1.7 times of what it was in 2016. Critical system parameters such as the maximum block size and block frequency can be increased when the provisioned bandwidth increases. The increase in provision bandwidth suggests that the block size can be increased by a factor of 1.7 without increasing centralization beyond its de facto level in 2016. Caveats. As with every measurement technique in the real world, our results are above are subject to experimental limitations and expected errors. The accuracy of the measurements may drop under certain circumstances, including the cases where, number one, the network bottleneck lies on the side of the measurement beacon rather than the remote peer. Number two, the network traffic on the side of BMS interferes with collected results. Number three, the remote peer intentionally shapes the traffic to selectively limit the bandwidth available to BMS, for instance, via bandwidth throttling. And number four, different steady-state bandwidth between Bitcoin and Ethereum, skewing the numbers for one system over another. The setup of our bandwidth infrastructure helps minimize potential inaccuracies due to the first two issues. Moreover, analysis of popular Bitcoin and Ethereum client implementations shows that the third case is not supported by this software and would require additional, potentially non-trivial work to set up. To verify the impact of the last issue, we ran Ethereum and Bitcoin client and saw that their bandwidth consumption differed by 0.2 megabytes per second, which introduces about a 1% error on our measurements above. In addition to our analysis above, we also expect to see certain artifacts in our data. As noted above, we see clusters of nodes around 10 megabytes per second and 100 megabytes per second, which are typical bandwidth capacities of home and EC2 users, respectively. 4.2. Network structure. The structure of the peer-to-peer network impacts the security and the performance for cryptocurrencies. A geographically clustered network can quickly propagate a new block to many other nodes. This makes it more difficult for a malicious miner to propagate conflicting blocks/transactions quicker than honest nodes. However, a less clustered network may mean that full nodes are being run by a wider variety of users, which is also good for decentralization. Methodology. Since it is not possible to obtain direct measurements between peers we do not control, we use the state-of-the-art estimation techniques to establish bounds and gain insights into the network infrastructure. Single beacon latency. We first collect direct ICMP ping measurements from the BMS nodes to all peers in the network. We report the minimum observed ping latency as it provides a physical bound on the distance to the BMS beacon. Peer-to-peer latency. Measuring the peer-to-peer latency requires access to the endpoints. In both Bitcoin and Ethereum, peers do not reveal their neighbors. Hiding the network structure boosts privacy and security, but also makes it harder to infer properties about the network. BMS provides latency estimates for a superset of the actual links between known peers. We do not normalize for the slightly different network sizes, 3390 for Bitcoin and 4302 for Ethereum, as our samples from both networks are very similar, or were very similar. Since measuring peer-to-peer latencies directly is not feasible, we establish bounds from observed latencies from multiple beacons using techniques from prior literature. BMS starts with the measurements taken from a single beacon, then it uses the triangle inequality to estimate the upper and lower bounds for the latency between peers. Repeating this process from other vantage points yields a set of bounds for each pair of peers. Finally, BMS determines a range for latency estimates between each peer by picking the maximum lower bound and the minimum upper bound. The paper also presents the average of the lower bound and upper bound latency between peers. In this study, BMS includes nodes that do not support the DAO fork in its measurements for Ethereum. Geographical distance. BMS takes the minimum of repeat latency measurements to eliminate transient network effects and capture the geographic distance between two nodes. BMS also uses IP geolocation data to calculate distance between peer nodes as an additional validation on our results. To calculate distances, BMS applies the Haversine formula, using the coordinate values gathered from an IP-based geolocation service. Results. Our measurements indicate considerable differences between peer-to-peer latencies of Bitcoin and Ethereum IPv4 networks, summarized in Table 2 and PDF graphed in Figure 3. We find that Bitcoin has many more nodes that are closer geographically than Ethereum. Figure 3 shows that Ethereum's most likely latencies are centered around 120 megabytes per second, while Bitcoin nodes tend to be clustered around 50 megabytes per second. Only 13% of Ethereum latencies are under 100. It says 100 ms, but I'm just assuming that's megabytes per second. That could be a different measurement. While Bitcoin has surprisingly high 46%. Additionally, the estimated peer-to-peer latency between Ethereum nodes, and it might be milliseconds. That's probably milliseconds. My apologies on that. Let's start that again. Bitcoin nodes tend to be clustered around 50 milliseconds. Only 13% of Ethereum latencies are under 100 milliseconds, while Bitcoin has surprisingly high 46%. Additionally, the estimated peer-to-peer latency between Ethereum nodes is 26.7% higher than Bitcoin on average. This geographic proximity between nodes, along with the observation that Bitcoin has many nodes with 100 megabytes per second of provisioned bandwidth, Section 4.1, seems to indicate that many Bitcoin nodes are run in data centers. 56% of Bitcoin nodes and 28% of Ethereum nodes belong to an autonomous system that provides dedicated hosting services, a difference significant in the 1% significance level. Indeed, Ethereum nodes are not accumulated in a single geographical region, but are more evenly distributed around the world. Figure 3c shows that CDF of distances between peer-to-peer nodes based on IP geolocation information. The results coordinate our findings based on network latency requirements and show that Ethereum nodes are geographically further apart than Bitcoin. As additional evidence, we then use geolocation of the peer-to-peer distances and plot the CDF. In Figure C3, we see that Ethereum nodes are farther apart than Bitcoin. Figure 3, the histogram of P2P latencies in Bitcoin. Figure 3a, and we're not going to go through the figures. Sanity checks. The first two columns of Table 2 represent single beacon latency in Bitcoin IPv4/IPv6 networks. The results indicate that both the median and the average latency to IPv4 nodes are smaller than IPv6 nodes. As there are fewer IPv6 nodes than IPv4 nodes, we expect this result since IPv4 nodes are more likely to be closer to our beacons. While there has been a large body of work showing the prevalence of triangle inequality violations in the Internet, there are several reasons why BMS's measurements are not affected significantly. First, such violations were shown to occur less than 5% of the network snapshots. Since we take the minimum latency observed from a beacon, triangle inequality violations will only occur in our dataset less than 1% of the time. TIVs are also significantly less prevalent when dealing with latencies less than 300 milliseconds, which includes almost our entire dataset. To ensure that the above results hold for the dataset as well, we use a geolocation service as the ground truth to verify our results. One other limitation in our study is that it is impossible to collect measurements using ICMP pings from nodes that block ICMP traffic from Tor nodes that only communicate over TCP. And we're going to take a brief pause there. We're on page 9 of 18, and so it seems like an appropriate stopping point, because we've got 4.3 distribution of mining power next. But for the moment, let's go ahead and throw back down into some music. I need a little bit more caffeine in my system. And as far as where we're going to go, let's go for a little bit of corrosion of conformity, damned for all time, here on Coin Metal. And that was Ministry with Let's Go. And so, if I can find that PDF that we were just chewing on, because, it's all the way on the other end of all my tabs, of course, but I found it. And so here we go, 4.3, and we're on page 9 of 18 of this white paper, and I'm not going to scroll all the way back up to the top of it to tell you the title of it, but I'm sure I'll have it in the descriptor of this. Oh, well, fuck it. I know exactly where we are, so 4.3. This is Decentralization in Bitcoin and Ethereum Networks. And this is like a study of the network latency and ping period and all that other crap. Continuing on, and so let's get all the way back down here to page 9. Section 4.3, Distribution of Mining Power. Mining on cryptocurrency networks is a complex process that typically requires large computation power. With the current mining difficulty of Bitcoin and Ethereum, using commodity hardware to generate blocks is not feasible, which centralizes the mining process somewhat. However, as long as there are many different entities mining, the system is still decentralized. We compare the decentralization of the mining processes between Bitcoin and Ethereum. Methodology. To identify the power of miners in Bitcoin and Ethereum, we examined their weekly distribution over the last 10 months, starting on July 15, 2016. Our mining power estimations are based on the ratio of main chain blocks generated by distinct entities. Hence, pruned blocks in Bitcoin and uncles in Ethereum do not affect these estimations. In both networks, miners voluntarily disclose their identity as part of each block they mine. We gathered this data from a public API for Bitcoin and a blockchain explorer for Ethereum. In Bitcoin, 1.8% of the blocks were unidentified, which we treated as if they were generated by distinct individual miners. Finally, we manually processed identities to detect and merge duplicates. This includes pools operated by the same administrator and multiple identities representing the same pool, which were identified by looking for the same pool name with a corresponding tag, ergo, Dwarf Pool 1 and Dwarf Pool 2. We do not distinguish between solo miners and mining pools because it would be misleading to do so. Some claim that mining pools provide a modicum of decentralization, albeit invisible, because they are comprised of multiple solo miners who can exit the pool if the pool operator misbehaves. While this is true, it requires detection of misbehaviors, which is not always possible. But in any case, our study captures a historical account of the mining power distribution as it took place and at the time a block was committed to the chain. The pool constituents were plaintively cooperating as part of the same pool. Results. For each week of the analysis period, we calculated the corresponding mining power of entities and ranked each miner accordingly. Figure 4 shows the top 20 weekly mining power distribution in the Ethereum and Bitcoin networks. Each group of bars represents a chronologically ordered collection of weekly mining power ratios defined as the fraction of blocks contributed by a miner. Figure 4 illustrates that in Bitcoin, the weekly mining power of a single entity has never exceeded 21% of the overall power. In contrast, the top Ethereum miner has never mined less than 21% of the mining power. Moreover, the top 4 Bitcoin miners have more than 53% of the average mining power. On average, 61% of the weekly power was shared by only 3 Ethereum miners. These observations suggest a slightly more centralized mining process in Ethereum. Although miners do change ranks over the observation period, each spot is only contested by a few miners. In particular, only 2 Bitcoin and 3 Ethereum miners ever held the top rank. The same mining pool has been at the top rank for 29% of the time in Bitcoin and 14% of the time in Ethereum. Over 50% of the mining power has exclusively been shared by 8 miners in Bitcoin and 5 miners in Ethereum throughout the observed period. Even 90% of the mining power seems to be controlled by only 16 miners in Bitcoin and only 11 miners in Ethereum. Hence, both platforms rely heavily on very few distinct mining entities to maintain the blockchain. Indeed, we see in Figure 5 that the mining power trends can be fit as exponential distributions with curves let's see, 0.21e, I'm not going to go through that. In Bitcoin and Ethereum, respectively, these curves yield a coefficient of determination value of 0.99. These results show that a Byzantine quorum system of size 20 could achieve better decentralization than proof-of-work mining at a much lower resource cost. This shows that further research is necessary to create permissionless consensus protocol without such a high degree of centralization. Sanity checks. Similar to other works in the literature, we assume that miners accurately self-identify themselves. A miner that contributes a significant portion of the hash power to the cryptocurrency can exert some amount of influence over protocol changes. Thus, it is likely that miners will want to claim blocks that they generated as their own. While strong miners gain political clout and attract more members, getting too large raises alarms among the community about centralization. Thus, such miners may conceal or obfuscate this information to appear less powerful, ergo by generating multiple identities. For instance, 2 major mining pools, ETHPool and Ethermine, publicly reveal that they share the same admin. Thus, any analysis based on the voluntary miner data skews toward a more decentralized network than the reality. Mining power utilization. Mining power utilization, which measures the fraction of mined blocks that remain in the main chain as a metric for evaluating the efficiency of a protocol, as well as a second-order metric for robustness against rollbacks. As mining power utilization increases, the protocol is able to convert more of the energy spent to useful work, and therefore the cost to launch an attack is higher. Methodology. To study the mining power utilization, we analyzed weekly and daily distribution of pruned blocks in Bitcoin and uncles in Ethereum, compared to the main chain blocks. While uncle blocks in Ethereum contribute to the selection of the main chain and rewards miners, uncle blocks do not sequence transactions. Thus, uncle blocks do not contribute to Ethereum's performance, but do contribute to the blockchain's security. We've retrieved this data from number 1, the Falcon network, number 2, a local Bitcoin client, and number 3, public blockchain explorers for Bitcoin and Ethereum. In particular, the Bitcoin Blockchain Explorer and Falcon exclusively provided 12% and 20% of the total 124 pruned blocks, respectively. Both sources commonly discovered the remaining 68%. Results. Figure 6a and Figure 6b show weekly and daily distributions of mining power utilization in Bitcoin and Ethereum networks respectively. The results show that Bitcoin utilization is always above 99%, which means that a pruned block in Bitcoin is a relatively rare event. In contrast, daily utilization in Ethereum is typically between 90 and 94% range and never goes above the 97% range threshold. During 2016, Ethereum faces occasional drops in its utilization, down from 74% to 88%, including number 1, the days following the exploitation of the DAO vulnerability from June 17th to 18th, number 2, attacks on the Ethereum network between September 22nd and October 19th, and number 3, the days following the spurious Dragon hard fork between November 23rd to 29th. These results indicate a strong relationship between mining power utilization and real-life events in Ethereum. This may be the result of preventative measures that spam the network to slow down the DAO attacker, bad actors generating blocks with excessive resource demands, and miners with outdated clients. These results indicate that a relay network like Falcon would be greatly beneficial to the Ethereum network. Sanity checks. The design of the Ethereum protocol requires peers to store and propagate uncle blocks, which are not on the main chain. In contrast, Bitcoin's blockchain only stores the main chain, so peers do not propagate pruned blocks. Hence, capturing such blocks in Bitcoin requires actively watching the network. While Falcon Relay Network provides a strong incentive to miners to relay blocks through it, some miners may choose not to do so. Consequently, we may be missing some pruned blocks that were generated by the Bitcoin network. 4.5. Fairness. Section 4.3 presented the mining power distribution, which looks at the main chain presence of miners. The impact of this distribution on a miner's pruned block rate is unclear. To study this relationship, we examined fairness, defined as the ratio of a miner's share of pruned blocks to her mining power. In a fair protocol, miners generate pruned blocks proportional to their mining power. Hence, the fairness is close to 1. A fairness greater than 1 implies that the miner is at a disadvantage, while a fairness less than 1 implies that the miner has an advantage. Methodology. We used the Falcon Network, a Bitcoin blockchain explorer, to retrieve the pruned Bitcoin blocks. These resources have respectively provided 109 to 99 blocks, yielding a total of 124 distinct pruned blocks. We collected uncles from the Ethereum Blockchain Explorer. Similar to Section 4.3, our results here also assume that miners voluntarily identify themselves in uncles/pruned blocks. Another caveat here lies in gathering pruned blocks. While we incentivize miners to relay blocks through Falcon, I wonder how you do that, there is no guarantee that they necessarily will do so. We suspect that explicit storage of uncles in Ethereum captures a larger portion of pruned blocks. Results. Figure 7 shows the distribution of fairness of 20 miners with the highest mining power. The results indicate that in both networks, the top 4 miners generally are more successful at appending blocks to the main chain. We run the Kolmogorov-Smirnov's goodness of fit test with a p-value of 0.01 to compare the fairness distributions of Bitcoin and Ethereum. Perhaps surprisingly, we see that the fairness of Ethereum and Bitcoin differ significantly from each other, keeping a constant time period. The result in this difference is a much larger shared deviation in Bitcoin's miner fairness compared to Ethereum, 1.72 versus 0.25. The meaning of both fairness distributions, however, are very similar, with Ethereum at 1.08 and Bitcoin at 1.22. A high variance results in centralization pressure, since smaller miners will have a more difficult time affording the loss of revenue due to a transiently high fairness score. This high variance is a direct result of a significantly smaller number of blocks being generated in Bitcoin. Since Ethereum has a higher block frequency than Bitcoin, smaller miners have a more predictable payoff than larger miners. This makes Ethereum more predictable to mine for smaller miners due to the lower variance in block rewards. Thus, it is important for blockchain protocols to take variance of the block rewards in addition to the mean. Simply increasing the block frequency may not be the solution to decrease the variance of block rewards, since the mining power distribution may be affected as well. The increased block frequency in Ethereum may be part of the cause of the slightly more centralized mining power distribution. See Section 4.3. Sanity checks. Similar to Section 4.4, our results here show our results here also assume, that miners voluntarily identify themselves in uncles and prune blocks. As before, if miners are lying, they are likely to present a more fair system than reality. Another caveat here lies in gathering prune blocks. While we incentivize miners to relay blocks through Falcon, there is no guarantee that they will. We suspect that explicit storage of uncles in Ethereum allows for more accurate analysis. Finally, Bitcoin has a significantly lower block generation frequency than Ethereum. On top of that, Bitcoin also has a lower prune block rate than Ethereum does, which means it has significantly fewer prune blocks. Thus, this fairness metric is much noisier in Bitcoin compared to Ethereum. Number 5. Related work. Network measurements in blockchain-based systems have mainly focused on Bitcoin. One such study demonstrated that the latency is the dominating factor in propagation of blocks smaller than 20 KB. Following work has shown that this limit has increased to 80 KB, and nodes are provisioned with substantially higher bandwidth capacity than what the protocol demands. Feld et al. Pointed out a strong AS-level centralization that may impact Bitcoin's network's connectivity, i.e., 10 ASs contain over 30% of the peers. Recent work presented the level of vulnerability, showing that 13 ASs cover the same fraction of peers, but only 39 IP prefixes host half of the overall mining power. Ours is the first work that does a similar type of study on Ethereum as well. Other work studied various aspects of the Bitcoin overlay network. Miner et al. Found that a small fraction of the network, containing around 100 nodes, represents more than 75% of the mining power. The study conjectured that these nodes are well connected to major mining pools, hence provide higher efficiency in broadcasting blocks. Buryukov et al. Examined how peer neighbors discover IP addresses that correspond to pseudonymous identities. Another study de-anonymized peers by observing anomalies relaying behavior in the network. Or anomalous relaying behavior in the network. My apologies there too. Papalardo et al. Observed how low-value transactions may experience waiting times of over a month. Other work measured churn and geolocated peers. Gervais et al. Discussed centralization concerns regarding the client development process, distribution of mining power, and spendable coins. Most of these works focus on attacks and the structure of the overall overlay network, while this work focuses on the resource capabilities of the nodes used in the overlay network. Recent work presented ways to reduce resource requirements to participate in blockchain systems. Such solutions enhance decentralization by increasing the diversity of participants. Aspen achieves this through sharding the blockchain. In this system, users store, process, and propagate only the data that is relevant to them, hence need fewer resources to join the network. Another approach relies on authenticated data structures to reduce the load on nodes. Relay networks increase network efficiency through faster block propagation. The first such system achieved this by avoiding full block verification and retransmitting known transactions. Falcon, the source of pruned block data in the Bitcoin network in this paper, relies on cut-through routing for faster block propagation. Finally, Fiber incorporates cut-through routing with compact blocks and forward error correction over UDP. The novelty in our work was utilizing Falcon data in order to gain insights into transient application layer information. Blockchain explorers provide a variety of data on cryptocurrency networks, including online blockchain history, statistics on blockchain components, transaction fees and market value, and node information. While these sources of information are useful to the community, this work scientifically tests whether the institutions provided by these sources of information indeed hold. Number 6. Conclusion. Decentralization in blockchain-based platforms is a component of the value proposition these systems offer. This work presents a comparative assessment of decentralization in two most popular cryptocurrencies, Bitcoin and Ethereum. To do so, it relies on novel measurement techniques to obtain application layer information using the Falcon network and the application of well-established internet measurement techniques. Our observations show that Bitcoin has a higher capacity network than Ethereum, but with more clustered nodes, likely in data centers. We also observed that Bitcoin and Ethereum have fairly centralized mining processes, that further research is needed to decentralize permissionless consensus protocols further. In Ethereum, the block rewards have less variance than Bitcoin's. Finally, Ethereum has a lower mining power utilization than Bitcoin, likely due to the high block frequency. Further, we see that Bitcoin has undergone tremendous growth and can increase the block size by a factor of 1.7 without any decrease in decentralization compared to 2016. Additionally, our study uncovers that the volatility of mining rewards is an important but often ignored metric. Finally, we see that Ethereum would likely benefit from a relay network to increase its mining power utilization. Acknowledgements. The authors thank Vitalik Buterin and the anonymous reviewers for their feedback on earlier drafts of this manuscript. Yal is supported by Viterbi Fellowship and the Center for Computer Engineering at Technion. This work was partially funded and supported by AFOSR grant F9550-16-0250, NSF CSR-1422-544, NSF CNS-160-1879, NSF CNS, I'm not going to go through all of that bullshit. Okay, so NIST, Information Technology Laboratory, Facebook, Infosys, and IC3, the Initiative for Cryptocurrencies and Smart Contracts. This material is based upon work by the National Science Foundation Graduate Research Fellowship Program under grant blah blah blah. I'm not going to do that. Any opinions, findings, and conclusions or recommendations expressed in this material are those by the authors and do not necessarily reflect the views of the National Science Foundation. And it gives us a whole bunch of references. Thankfully, 2 pages of them. Man. Anyway, so one thing I just want to say off the top of this, that I think some people get the whole monetization or the incentivization thing confused. And I've often said that I believe that Bitcoin probably should be expanded to at least 4 megabytes for the block size limit, if not 8. I mean, because the Bitcoin Cash Network showed that they can do 8 megabyte blocks, and they can sustain 8 megabyte blocks, even though for some stupid reason recently they figured out that the default setting was to 2 megabytes. I don't know why. Their fucking max megabyte setting is I think it's 128 or some shit now. I don't know. Anyway, point being that I think one of the biggest problems with regard to Bitcoin and Ethereum is that they're not necessarily profitable enough for these smaller miners to get into. And so either the value has to increase significantly, or the block size has to increase so that more transactions can be processed per 10-minute period. Either one of those will increase the incentive to mine, which I believe would probably solve some of the issues brought up in this paper. Things like mining concentration. You know, that it's simply unprofitable for a lot of people to mine at this point. Should it become more profitable due to either changes in the protocol or in fact market conditions, I believe the incentive to mine would increase. Now, we have yet to see this expressed fully with regard to the Bitcoin Cash Network or BSV network. Most of the interest that we've seen on their networks has been something like Ethereum, in that they're wanting to build on their blockchain and have continuous transactions by certain big-ass entities. And that's all wonderful. But I think that in the longer term, what we're going to find is that, we're going to run into issues like on the Ethereum network where they're suffering congestion. And again, this is due to distribution of nodes. As more miners are incentivized to have nodes and miners, as more people are incentivized to mine, I believe that you would see a resolution with regard to these network bottlenecks, because the network itself would distribute over a broader space and you would have shorter distances between nodes. That's one of the issues with network propagation, is like on one link you're spanning 8,000 miles, and on another link you're spanning 15 miles. And so the latency differential between those two, the information you're getting from 8,000 miles away and the information you're getting from 15,000 miles away, or 15 miles away, the differential is there. However, if more miners were incentivized to mine, the likelihood that you're going to have an 8,000 mile span between any of your nodes goes way down. And that reduces your network latency with either your main chain or your uncles or your prune blocks, whatever. And so the Falcon network isn't necessary. What is necessary is more fucking miners. That's what's necessary. That's what they're telling you in this fucking paper. I find more and more, I believe that this is a result of the mis-selling of cryptocurrencies to the general public. You are to understand that these networks are composed of you and other people like you that want to transact in Ethereum or Bitcoin or any of another number of cryptocurrencies out there available for you to mine with your home computer. See, if it were sold to you like that you are supposed to be part of this network, you are supposed to be the market determining the price for this shit. If it was sold to you as that, instead of, I'm interested in the underlying technology, blockchain. Not, I want to be the bull producing the bullshit. No, I'm fantasizing about what I'm going to do, playing in the bullshit. That's how it's been sold to the general public for like the last, I would say, probably like 4 or 5 years. Except for on this show. We've been trying to present it in the context of you are the networks. You are the people that mine this shit. You are the people that write the code for this shit. This is yours. This doesn't belong to some fucking government or some corporation. This shit is yours. You know, more people start behaving that way, we are going to see less and less of these fucking studies saying, oh, the network latency, we need another subnetwork to convey the blocks and the prunes and the blah, blah, blah. Yeah, fuck you. Gonna not need that because the distance between any node is going to be an average of about 20, maybe 30 miles. You know, except for expanses of ocean, and then, you know, you might have the 8,000 mile jump from here to China. But I'm sure that there'll be other ways to route the fucking traffic around that are much shorter and that you will have intermediate nodes between. Yeah. Again, I think, you know, again, this is just a misread in my opinion. You know, I mean, it's a good study and it is useful in that it does provide us this insight. But I believe that there are theories about, you know, what's needed. You know, oh, you need a third-party network. Yeah, that's what you need on your peer-to-peer network, is you need a third party to bump around your blocks. No. That's what the network is for. It's supposed to do that on its own. What it needs is more members, more peers, to shorten up the length of the jump from one to another, or hop rather. My apologies. But yeah, that's my thought on this. And I think in the not-so-distant future, we are going to see a vast increase in the value of cryptocurrencies. I believe that in the longer term, there's going to be some sort of issue with regard to the market and people being able to recover their funds from the market and get an equitable amount of their actual investment back through taxation and whatever, or just outright seizure. You know, maybe some market failures, you know, big old sell-off, nice 2,000 point red needle downward, you know, that might shake up the faith in the legacy markets and the old FANG stocks and stuff like that. People start looking abroad saying, you know what, there's probably a better investment vehicle that is violent and fucking volatile as it is going to be less volatile than my portfolio currently is experiencing. And they're going to be looking for other vehicles to stash that monetary value into, and cryptocurrencies are going to be a really good fit simply because they can go from one form to a form that can fit all forms. You know, once you put it in, like, say, Doge or something like that, you know, if there's any vehicle, if there's any retailers that transact specifically in Doge, you're opened up to those people on it all of a sudden. That you have a resource that both has a market value that can be exchanged for other resources that have other market values, as well as spend it as a currency itself. This is very different from any other kind of vehicle that we've had. I mean, can you take your fucking Apple stock down to the Apple store and use it as cash? No. But if Apple were to create a cryptocurrency that they themselves were producing miners for, or better yet, if they just produced miners and did have on top of it like a credit system, you know, where, you know, if you mine Bitcoin on their miners, you're additionally compensated directly from Apple with some sort of ticket or token or whatever that you could take back to the Apple store and spend as cash. You know, this is the kind of future that's opening up before us, and people still want to act like it's just a bunch of fucking banks and it's just a bunch of stockbrokers and they're telling you what the market is and you don't have any real participation in it other than what your estimated portfolio valuation is. And well, we're going to fall out of this fantasy land at one point or another. We're going to understand that the trusted entities that we've placed so much trust in, they don't know what they're talking about. You know, when I read these papers and whatnot, I see I see semblance of understanding, and probably this one right here that we just read was probably the most comprehensive in its understanding. It's very technical, it's very in-depth, provides us with real information that we can put to use in our judgment of things. However, I just believe their conclusions were a little off. But I think it's because they were looking at the wrong thing. They were looking at the overall health and utilization of the network, which is fine. It's a good thing to measure. Solid information, like I said. But their determination on what's causing issues, again, I think that you can solve a lot of this shit if you had about 3 times as many nodes out there by 3 times as many owners. Or maybe 5 times as many, 10 times, 100 times. We still act like, this shit is like mainstream, but it's because we ourselves saturate ourselves with information from this. We read books about cryptocurrency. We read articles about cryptocurrency. Our social networks are fucking nothing but cryptocurrency related channels and pages. Okay, and so according to our perception, our reality, this is like, 90% of the fucking planet is participating in this shit, man. That's not a fact at all, man. We're down at like, 0.4% of the planet even knows about this shit. Or, I'm sorry, they might actually have heard of Bitcoin. They might have even heard of a few altcoins. But it's from you. Yeah, the 0.4% that actually holds any. Or transacts any. Or mines any. Okay, they tell you about in that page there, or that paper that we just read. They were talking about 13 entities control the majority of the fucking hashing power on the Bitcoin network. 13. Okay, at one time we were talking about this being the biggest fucking network on planet Earth. It's been narrowed down to 13 majority participants. And I'm sure that there was a whole bunch of independents out there, and there's probably as many, if not slightly more than there were back in like 2013, 2014. But again, they're narrowed down to a smaller pool of interest. And so, I believe that if there were a 10x jump in the number of nodes out there, both miners and just monitoring nodes and whatnot, that you wouldn't see as big a latency issue, and you probably see even higher network utilization than you currently are on both networks, Bitcoin and Ethereum. Anyway, let's go ahead and throw back down into some music, and I'm feeling the need for a little bit of Pantera. I don't say it very much, but I think it is necessary. And so here we go, Domination by Pantera here on Coin Metal. And that was Sepultura with Refuse, Resist. And so, as we're drawing this one to the close, I've been wanting to read about this one on this show at least. And I've been kind of holding back on it just because I really wanted to read that white paper, kind of give us some more technical stuff in the show, man. I get so caught up in bullshit, laws and countries and what they're going to do and what they're not going to do, what isn't really going to happen, but people think it's going to happen, all that kind of shit. I wanted to get into some meat today. So, however cursorily this may seem to relate to what we were just talking about, you have to consider that things run a certain way because people are funding their way, funding it being run a certain way. And so what that can mean? Well, it comes down to who's providing the funding sometimes. And so I got this thing here. It's on alum.mit.edu. Who's backing Bitcoin at MIT? And this is actually really old, but it's kind of important. July 3rd, 2014, Joe McGonigal, and here we go. And so, yes, penis. My apologies there. 2 current MIT students, Sloan graduate Dan Elitzer and junior Jeremy Rubin, got together last winter to brainstorm a way to catalyze Bitcoin use on the MIT campus. They had a growing fondness for digital currencies as an emerging technology, and knew others did too. What if they gave every current undergraduate student the Bitcoin equivalent of $100 to use as they wish? The two asked themselves, would 4,500 undergraduates be enough to jumpstart a digital currency economy on campus? They'll find out this fall. In April, Rubin and Elitzer announced that donors had underwritten $500,000 for the MIT Bitcoin project to fund their idea. The students are currently coordinating a method of distributing those $100 payments to each undergrad this September. Their project will be the largest targeted Bitcoin giveaway in the brief history of the currency, and many will gauge the potential for digital currencies in the world upon seeing MIT's results. If MIT students can't make sense of them after all, who can? Elitzer and Rubin still knew they'd have to do some education on campus before rolling out such a large project. A year ago, Elitzer founded MIT's Bitcoin Club, which hosted an expo this spring to lure digital currency professionals to campus to speak. This summer, Elitzer, Rubin, and classmate Richard Nee are hosting hack nights with their club, and they have organized BitComp, a $15,000 summer startup competition to develop useful Bitcoin apps for MIT students. Round 1 winners included Raphael Pass, PhD 06, and Tiffany Wong, class of 16, I guess. They're also meeting with professionals and researchers who help them distribute the currency and study its results. Alex Morcos, 97 and 98, MENG 98, is one of the many alumni fans of digital currency. With a background on Wall Street, Morcos recently co-founded cryptocurrency think tank Chaincode Labs. When Morcos met Elitzer at a conference last winter, Elitzer pitched him the MIT Bitcoin project. Almost immediately, Morcos pledged to fund half of it. This week, Morcos responded to a few questions about why he said yes. Why did you make this gift? What are your hopes for the change it will affect? Jeremy and Dan had dreamed up this wonderful project, and I believed that it would provide a great opportunity for both MIT and the Bitcoin ecosystem. I'm hopeful that this experiment will both showcase the positive promise of Bitcoin and also excite a new generation of computer scientists to this fascinating new field. It will also help move MIT to the forefront of this research area. Why is MIT the perfect place to try this kind of project? MIT has long been a leader in the application of new technology to solving the world's problems. Bitcoin represents the beginning of an entirely new field of research which holds the potential to radically change finance and banking. This presents tremendous opportunities to benefit society as costs and barriers to entry come down and access is open to the underbanked. And I just want to pause it right there and just let it sit right there, because apparently there's not much more to this here. How has your work in venture capital convinced you that such an investment at MIT is worthwhile? I actually haven't worked in the VC industry other than a few small angel investments, but I have long thought that any investment in MIT is very worthwhile. How did your own experience at MIT shape your thoughts later about digital currencies, if at all? MIT taught me an appreciation for elegant solutions to difficult problems, and this was what first drew me to Bitcoin. How will you know that this experiment was a success in the short or long term? I'm hopeful that it will be very obvious that some exciting new developments have come about because of this project. And that wasn't quite what I was hoping it was going to be, but there's been some concern that Jeffrey Epstein was related somehow in the funding of this project, and that there were a few intermediaries in between that knew where the money was coming from. And so it's those kind of backings that have kind of underpinned a lot of projects in cryptocurrencies. And there seems to be a lot of... I saw a map recently. Somebody had taken the time to diagram the connections between several entities in the cryptosphere. And it seems like Bitfinex is like a central hub or something. And I find that kind of scary, given that the NYAG has chosen them to target. But one thing about this, if in fact there is pedo money running around here, and there is criminal money running around here in cryptocurrencies, I would rather it be flushed out by people that are committing fraudulent and criminal acts. And I believe that Bitfinex, or iFinex rather, through Tether, has been not laundering money necessarily, but naked shorting Bitcoin through their Tether project. But that's just my feeling, and they've been using Bitfinex as a main hub for it. Again, that is just my feeling. It could be different. I could be wrong. But, been around a little while, seen a lot of stuff, and I really believe that funding determines the direction of a project. And if certain entities who are corrupt to their very core are funding a project, its apparent direction will suit their interests above yours. And when it does, that's when you know it's time to move on with your monetary value to another project that does not at least seem as perverted or corrupted. Among the missions of Bitcoin is, in cryptocurrencies in general, I believe at least, is not only to give the unbanked a means of transacting globally without a third-party intermediary, but I think it's also to, how should I say this, reappropriate the center of balance with regard to funding and who that funding benefits. And this is why Bitcoin is apolitical and cryptocurrencies are apolitical, at least on their face. But their use can actually transmit vast amounts of information about how people feel about their economy and the monetary units that they have to transact with. And it is with that I'd like to close out this episode. Thank you very much for listening. I certainly do appreciate the support. We will be back again on Wednesday at 8 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. And so until then, I want y'all to trade safe. Do your homework. And watch out for your own bunghole, because nobody else is going to do it for you. As far as our last dance is concerned, we're going to go ahead and throw down a little bit of Skindred here. Nobody. Last dance here on Coin Metal. Thank you again for listening, and you all have an excellent evening. Good night.